We're gonna, Thanks so much for being here. My name is Victoria Wingel, and I am the Forest and Climate Campaigner with Oregon Wild, and I'm based in Portland, Oregon. But you may occasionally also find me at other in-person events for wild ones across the state. So here with me today, we have Sammy Godlove, the Central Oregon Field Coordinator, who's based in Bend. Phoenix Johnson, who's our digital communications associate, who's in Salem, but also works out of the Portland office. And then also in Portland, we have Daniel Mosier, who is our wildlife program manager, and Aaron Robertson, our communications director. So welcome to our Wild Ones kickoff event. For some of you, this may be your first Wild Ones meeting, but for others, you may have joined us before. But either way, we're so glad that you're here tonight. So we have a couple of housekeeping items for this evening. As you know, we had some technical difficulties, so we might do an abbreviated version of this presentation tonight, and we'll send out the recording for everyone. And we'll likely reschedule this as well, so we can do this again for some more folks. But our speakers have a ton of really great information to share with you tonight. So this kickoff session is structured more like a webcast presentation than our Wild Ones events will be in the future. So our presentation tonight is broken up into two different parts. In the first session, we're going to give you the opportunity to meet some of the folks who will be leading future Wild Ones trainings. And then we are also going to work on, or Aaron is going to give a workshop on writing letters to the editors as the second half of this event. So we have the Q&A feature on. So as questions come to you throughout the presentation, please feel free to use the Q&A box, and we'll save time at the end of both sessions so that we can answer those. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started since we're a little behind schedule. Let's see. Okay, so who we are. So for those of you who are new here, Oregon Wild is Oregon's oldest state-based conservation organization. We celebrated our 50th anniversary last year, and we have a really rich history of protecting wild lands, wildlife, and waters across the state. But we also frequently wade into federal conservation policy as well. Grassroots organizing is really the backbone of all of the work that we do, and we rely on people power to forge the change that we need to see. So Wild Ones serves as a grassroots training and action program where we gather with passionate activists across the state and we share skills so that we can work together to ensure our advocacy is as effective as possible. And as you know, this work is more important now than ever. So we're relaunching this program in response to the extreme attacks coming from our current administration on our public lands, wild places, and wildlife that we all cherish. We're only a few months into this new administration, and we've already been really busy battling attacks on some of our most critical bedrock environmental policies like the Endangered Species Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, the Roadless Rule that currently safeguards millions of acres of old growth forest across the country, and numerous executive orders that aim to fast track logging sales on our public lands. And these attacks are coming at an unprecedented pace. And we see this program, Wild Ones, as a way to grow and strengthen our community so that we're ready to respond to whatever this administration throws at us. So if you are feeling fed up, fired up, and ready to take action, Wild Ones is the place for you. At our core, we believe that we are stronger when we are working together, and it should come as no surprise to you that the stakes are high and the challenges we face today are enormous. But we don't have to face them alone. So it's our hope that Wild Ones becomes a community that you can turn to when you're feeling inspired and you're looking for ways to take action. But also when you're feeling down and need to borrow some hope from like-minded people who are willing to carry the torch when you can't. We believe that joy is resistance and that the combination of community and collective action will bring about lasting change. So in the coming months, we will be rolling out a series of in-person and online events where we'll unpack some of the most pressing challenges to conservation policy that we're facing, but more importantly, teach you how you can push back. So let's get started. Next, we're going to introduce some of our other staff who you may run into at future Wild Ones events. They're all going to share a bit about their program, what's at stake this year, and what you can do now to help. So first, I'm going to pass it over to Sammy Godlove to talk a little bit about public lands defense.
All right. Thanks, Victoria. So yeah, again, my name is Sammy Godlove. I'm the Central Oregon Field Coordinator for Oregon Wild, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of our public lands defense campaigns. Go ahead to the next slide. Cool. So it's no secret that our public lands are under attack right now, in so many different ways. Here's a list of just a few of those threats that we've seen over the last 7 months or so. Um, and just so many different attacks. And really, with each attack, we're kind of seeing this common theme of one, taking away public control and input from public lands management, and then handing over control of our public lands to private and commercial interests. And basically, this all adds up to a lot more commercial logging and extraction across our forests and our public lands. So yeah, there's been a lot of bad news recently. The good news is that these are still our public lands, right? And there are still ways for us to make an impact and to fight back. And that's sort of what Wild Ones will be all about. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of you in the audience, you may or may not have heard or been following along with what's currently been going on with the Roadless Rule. So the Roadless Rule is this big, important environmental policy that protects our wildest and most intact national forest lands from road construction, commercial logging, development, and other industrial activities. In Oregon, it's almost 2 million acres of public lands that are protected by the Roadless Rule. So those 2 million acres and 45 million nationwide are under threat right now. And in Oregon, that includes all of these areas on the map shaded in blue. Some of our most iconic landscapes. Examples include Lost Lake on Mount Hood, Larch Mountain in the Gorge, the Cascade Lakes in Central Oregon, Hell's Canyon, Hardesty Mountain, so many other places. And then about a month ago, the Trump administration officially announced that it will be eliminating the Roadless Rule and protections for all of these places. And then that kicked off a 3-week comment period, which just ended last Friday. If any of you submitted public comments, thank you for that. We did have a pretty incredible public response opposing this attack on the Roadless Rule, and that's thanks to activists like you all across the nation. But this is really just the start of the process. We expect another public comment period opportunity on this proposal sometime next spring, so stay tuned for that. And then in the meantime, we're really focused on advancing and passing a bill in Congress called the Roadless Area Conservation Act, or RACA. This would legislatively protect all of these areas and result in much more permanent protections that the Trump administration or a future administration can't just undo, like they're trying to do now. Next slide. And that's where we'll need help from all of you in the coming weeks and months. And the most impactful thing you can do right now is to tell your members of Congress to pass this important bill. So if you're a member of Congress is not yet a co-sponsor or a supporter of this bill, ask them to support it and become a co-sponsor. For those who live in Oregon, Rep. Bentz and Rep. Hoyle are the two remaining who have not yet supported the bill. Rep. Hoyle is the only Democrat who's not yet a co-sponsor. So, everyone's voice matters in all of this, but if you live in Rep. Hoyle's district, your voice might be even more valuable right now on this issue. And then on the other hand, if they are a co-sponsor, definitely thank them for that. That's important. And then also ask them to make this a priority and do whatever they can do to move and advance the bill. And in Oregon, it's Senators Wyden and Merkley, Reps Salinas, Dexter, Bynum, and Bonamici, who are all current co-sponsors. And there's several different ways you can reach out to them, make your voice heard. We have a QR code up on this screen right now that you can scan and do right now if you like. Also, calling, emailing their offices, tagging their accounts on social media, and then mentioning them in letters to the editor that you write and submit, which we'll all be learning a little more about how to do this evening. And then lastly, if you go hike or visit in some of these roadless areas, take photos. You can send those to your representatives as well. We do have an interactive map on our website, OregonWild.org, that you can use to find a roadless area near you. Next slide. And then if and when that next comment period does begin, again, we're likely to be next spring, stay tuned for other engagement opportunities like comment writing events and workshops. So these photos are from an event that we did in Bend earlier this month at the beginning of this last comment period. We had a bunch of activists show up and sign postcards and submit public comments on that. It was a pretty great event. And with that, I think I'm passing it on to Danielle.
Thanks so much, Sammy. Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Moser, and I'm the Wildlife Program Manager for Oregon Wild. Thanks so much for joining us. And I'm going to talk about the Wildlife Program, and it says a look at priorities for 2026, but really it's also right now. I think that's more of a reference for just when the next legislative session starts in Oregon. But anyway, there's lots to be done even right now. So slide. So I'm going to talk about what's at stake for Oregon's wildlife opportunity. So I'm excited to share something positive that we're working on that hopefully excites you as much as it excites me, and then how you can help. So next slide. Okay, so what's at stake? And this is definitely the doom and gloom part of the presentation, but it is important to understand what we're working towards and why. And so really want to talk about the extinction crisis and how it's affecting Oregon. And even before I do that, I just think it's always important to open up this talk to really talk and set the context about the global extinction crisis. Even before I took this job and was working on this specifically in Oregon, when I would hear the phrase global extinction crisis or biodiversity crisis, I really felt like that was something happening in other countries. It really, the animals that get showcased to talk about extinction are, really charismatic megafauna like rhinos or lions in Africa or tigers in Asia. And so it is absolutely affecting those species and species around the globe. But the fact of the matter is it is also incredibly impactful here in America and even in Oregon. So we are definitely not immune to what's going on and seeing those species declining at a scarily rapid rate. And so scientists have estimated that about a third of all species, and when I say species, I mean fish, wildlife, invertebrates like pollinators, and plants. So that does include plants, are headed towards extinction. And to be honest, that number is probably low because there's so much about so many species we just don't know. And so it's a really scary number. And to be honest, that's the trend that we are seeing in Oregon. It's about a third of species are headed towards they're either imperiled and declining and heading toward extinction. And so the State Department of Fish and Wildlife just recently classified species. They looked at the science to determine how Oregon species are doing, and we are now up over 300 species of greatest conservation need. And so it's not great, but there is stuff we can do, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then even, they also assessed the different habitat types across Oregon, and essentially all of them are at risk for one reason or another. And, you probably know that there are so many species that, of course, are incredibly habitat dependent, like the great gray owl. So these two things are inextricably linked. And it's being exacerbated by things like federal funding cuts, which I'm sure you're hearing about, but that does have real and direct impacts on Oregon's wildlife. The little bit of money that Oregon gets even from the federal government to do recovery for our most imperiled and vulnerable species, which was already pretty small to begin with, has been completely zeroed out. So Oregon will not be receiving that money, which means it pushes these vulnerable species even further, to the brink of extinction. And so we need to do something. We need to do it now. And Sammy and Victoria have mentioned, we also have seen, of course, rollbacks and attempts to undercut our most important law to protect species, which is the Endangered Species Act. So all of these things together are making it, of course, a lot harder, but even more important, why we need to do something now. So next slide. So that's the doom and gloom. Sorry, we have to be there at some point to just kind of lay the foundation so you know what's going on. But the exciting thing is, and it's honestly something that gives me hope and inspiration, especially in a time that is so difficult, is that we do have a solution in Oregon, and we're ready and have a lot of momentum to get it done in 2026. And this is known as 1% for wildlife. So one of the big issues and the reasons we are struggling in Oregon and in the country, to be honest, nationwide, to address so many species needs is just a lack of funding. The way funding for fish and wildlife historically has been set up is that those species that we hunt and fish, or that you all or whomever hunt and fish, there's fees and licenses that you pay, and that money goes back into the agency to then support those types of programs for those species. And, so that feedback loop, which is fine for those species, means though we have left off about 80% of the rest of Oregon's species that we don't hunt and fish, which is the majority of those that are vulnerable or imperiled. And so this funding mechanism has really struggled to be broad and widespread in its approach, and in order to serve all species and all landscapes. And so funding is a really critical thing that we need to solve for. People have been looking into it for decades, and it's been tough. It's not a priority of the legislature, or at least it hasn't been. And so we're excited because we have momentum for this bill, and what it would do is increase the transient lodging tax by 1% or 1.25%, depending on where we come down with the bill, but essentially by 1 percentage point, in order to fund directly that species conservation work. And just to be clear, when we say transient lodging, that's on like a tax you pay on a hotel or an Airbnb, not on housing. So it's not referring to housing, it's referring to more like a tourism tax. And the reason we think this is an incredibly important way to pay for this is because so many of the reasons people come to our incredible state is to experience our nature and see wildlife and recreate. And so we see this as sort of a regenerative way to support wildlife, but also reinvest back into the reason that people are coming to the state in the first place. And so we were really close to passing this bill in 2025. Unsurprisingly, there were some political shenanigans to stall our bill, and they were successful, but we have even more momentum, even more excitement to get it done. And especially with these federal funding cuts, it's even more important, because the thing about species recovery is that it is exponentially more expensive to save a species that's close to extinction than it is to be proactive and to protect species early. And so for us, it's not just about dollars and cents, but it also makes a good argument to legislators about why they should do this now instead of waiting until we have species in critical condition. And then the final thing I want to say about this is, whether you are a wildlife enthusiast or not, the thing that is really important about this and about solving the extinction crisis is that it has a real negative cascading effect on the rest of our ecosystem health and on human communities if species go extinct. And so while I don't want species to go extinct for their own intrinsic value and for protecting biodiversity, but there is also a very real human connection to why we need species to thrive in an ecosystem. Okay, next slide. So we are excited and hope you will join us in all these advocacy opportunities that now and coming up in the coming months and into the new year. And so this is an encouragement to be as ferocious as a Wolverine in this advocacy, because we're going to need everybody with us to get this bill across the finish line. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So what you can do, and again, we're going to talk about some of these further in the program, but one of the things you can do now is submitting letters to the editor. Even though we don't have a bill number yet for the legislation that will be introduced in 2026, it's still important to submit letters to the editor talking about how extinction is impacting Oregon, why you care about wildlife, and why legislators should be ready to support 1% for wildlife. I think we all need something to inspire us and give us hope. And that's honestly what makes me so excited about this bill. You know, it's important that we stop all these bad things happening at the federal level and prevent things from going from bad to worse. But what excites me is that this is not just preventing something going from bad to worse. This is actually something that would be historic, would be a game changer for wildlife, and would make Oregon a national leader in protecting biodiversity and our wildlife. And so it makes me particularly happy to do something that makes me happy in such terrible times. And so anyway, things like that kind of message might resonate with people. So feel free to do that in your letters to the editor. And then coming up like I said, in the next few months, this one in particular, in the next year, we're planning a big lobby day and rally the first week of the legislative session. Likely will be February 4th. We will confirm that. I will send out save the dates, but I just want to put that on your radar. We want to show up big to the legislature. We want them to know they cannot walk away from this session without passing this bill. So hopefully you can join us for that. And then there'll be opportunities to testify at public hearings and, you know, send messages to your legislators, call your legislators. So those are all forthcoming. And then finally, and we'll hear from Phoenix, but there will be lots of relevant content on social media. So it would be great to have you share it with your networks and help our movement get even bigger, which is what a great tool social media is to help with that. So thank you so much.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Phoenix. I'm our digital communications associate. A lot of times that translates in real life to social media manager. Just kind of hopping into this, we had Sammy and Danielle talk about these really big campaigns and then social media coming into it. And really because at the end of the day, when we're trying to build momentum behind this, it's a communications thing and it's a conversation thing. And so many of those conversations are happening online. So next slide, I'm going to justify a little bit why we're talking about social media and why it's important. So media consumption is changing. A lot of you have probably seen this in your everyday lives. 86% of American adults get at least some of their news from a digital device, and people who are already on these sites like Instagram and TikTok are relying on them for news, right? So these conversations are already happening online and on social media. If we as the environmental movement want to be a part of this, social media is a great tool to use to spur those conversations, create conversations, and talk peer-to-peer with people who look up to us or even just are friends with us. Sharing stuff like this and what we care about helps create a personal story behind it. And if Oregon Wild posts something about, 1% for wildlife or the roadless rule, it's going to mean one thing. But if someone that you look up to, a parent, a friend, if you post about it, it can hold a little bit more weight. So we're going to get into why, yes, interact with us, but also post on your own. So we can hop to the next slide here. So community connection, conversations, and culture. So this is really one of our big goals with social media, building community, right? It can be a little bit isolating, especially on social media. Everyone gets into those doom scrolls, which I'll talk about in a second. But we really want to build this area where you can see that you're not the only one who cares about this. You're not the only one who cares about the extinction crisis. You're not the only one who cares about our forests. We have a community there, leading into connection. So these can feel like big existential threats, but when we connect them with other people and connect them to real life places, like the way we were able to do with Roadless and show you guys these areas that are near and dear to you, Lost Lake being a really big one that I have a picture of here in a second, it helps build that connection to a real life place. And this isn't just some far off thing that's happening. And then conversations, right? It's more than just consuming. It's messaging back and forth, it's the comment section, it's connecting with other people, wildlife photographers, it's connecting with other advocates, it's our group chat that we just started that some of you might have heard about this through, right? And at the end of the day, all three of those things build into culture. If we want this policy to shift, if we want to create a culture where we center nature and letting it thrive, we need to start creating that culture. And social media is a space where we can do that and we can reach people that you might not be able to reach in your day-to-day life. Next slide. So a vision forward with social media. First, I could sit here and talk about it forever, but our next Wild Ones event in person is going to be in Salem. So I'll be holding a content creation for conversation or for conservation. And that it might be one thing for me to sit here and say, you should share about like the TLT, so the transient lodging tax, the 1% for wildlife, but then it might be like, how? So our next event, I'll be going over a little bit more in depth about why social media is important, but I'll also be going through how you can do this and why you don't need to be an Instagram influencer or have a brand or have a platform for it to be important for you to post about things that you care about, and resources that you can use to find photos, that you can use to find information to post about it. Our Wild Ones chat. So if you're already on Instagram, if you head to our profile, you'll see a little thing that says Wild Ones, and we'll be updating any like the recording for this or any new events, or if something comes up like a comment period and we want to react to it quickly, we'll be posting in that group chat. So I encourage you to join it. We'll always post on our regular channels and we'll send out through our newsletter and stuff like that. But we'll just get a little bit more in the weeds with the chat and we'll be able to talk about stuff a little bit more. So I encourage you to join that. And then our next event, so it's going to be in Salem. So please join us there if you're coming or close to the Capitol, and I'll be talking a little bit more about the how-to, like I mentioned before. And then finally, I can't, as the social media manager, not mention this. The best way that you can make sure that you're staying effective on social media and sharing it is to not be chronically online. I'm someone who's guilty of this. But at the end of the day, post about it, talk about it, share about it, but also don't get lost in your screen. Get out there and go and see these places. And believe it or not, getting off of social media actually does help you being effective, spreading the word on social media by not living in that world. And then the next, I think we're moving on to our other topic. Okay, so that was a lot of information, very fast. I do want to be able to pass on to Erin to talk a little bit about letters to the editor, but I want to take a moment to breathe because between the extinction crisis and the roadless rule, that was a lot. And this can feel kind of heavy. And so leading into going out and, touching the grass, touching the trees, touching the ocean, kind of just taking a breath. I want to talk about some ways really, really quickly that we have been here before and we have won these battles and we can again. So next slide. So really quick, this is not the first time that we've been here before. Just for instance, these are a couple different times that we've faced odds. So 1981, the Sagebrush Rebellion, despite the anti-public lands appointments that came out of Reagan winning the election and also the Congress switching over to a non-democratic majority for the first time in a couple decades, we still managed to litigate and get 850,000 acres of wilderness protected in the Oregon Forest Wilderness Act. We also, just 4 years before the Northwest Forest Plan, 18 different ancient forests were opened for logging, but we were able to litigate once again and stop that and protect those old growth forests. The Northwest Forest Plan came in. I know that we had a comment period on it, but once again, we came back from that. And then finally, just from the last Trump administration, during the last Trump administration, we were able to get a wilderness area designated. So I know the odds feel big, but I just wanted to point out we've faced large odds and we've come out victorious and we've protected important places and important species, and we can do it again. Next slide. I'm talking very fast, but this is a picture from Rabble Rouser. It was a really great event we had where we got to meet a lot of you in person. And just a reminder, because this is from specifically an art presentation that we had, that all sorts of skills play into this movement. You show up who you are and plug into the way that you plug in. You don't have to be everything to every movement. And just a little note there. So I want to hand it over to Erin because I know we're getting short on time. But if you like the social media stuff, next Wild Ones group, you'll hear a little bit more from me.
All right, are people seeing my screen?
Yes, looks good over here.
Great. Okay. It all changed on my side. Hi, everyone. I shoved my presentation into an old presentation into the new branding, so it's not going to look as nice and polished as my colleagues. But this is a presentation on the importance of letters to the editor. Who am I? My name is Aaron Robertson. I am the communications director for Oregon Wild. I have been doing this job for 11 years at Oregon Wild. I have been doing communications for 17 years. So before I worked at Oregon Wild, I was a congressional staffer, and you'll hear some of that experience throughout this presentation and how that relates to being an effective advocate. I'm also a father, a backpacker, and a Dungeons and Dragons dungeon master. I have my dice right here, my hand, because I play Dungeons and Dragons at this same setup computer on Mondays. So a little background that some of this many of you will be pretty familiar with, but we're going through it to add some context. The rise of the internet made some huge shifts in the media landscape. Local newspapers typically relied a lot on local advertising and classifieds advertising. With the rise of things like Craigslist, allowing people to post for free online, and later Facebook Marketplace, and local businesses able to serve direct ads through Facebook or Google, there was no need for that middleman anymore that were the local newspapers. So local newspapers lost a lot of revenue through that. Now, they also had subscribers, but as we have become more politically polarized as a country, a lot of those subscribers have abandoned publications for things like, oh, they wrote an editorial I didn't like, or they published a letter that I didn't like, or they reported factually on issues that made me feel bad about myself, and so I have ended my subscription to that newspaper. And so social media has kind of come in and imperfectly filled some of the voids of local news. Weakened in a weakened state because they were losing so much revenue and subscriber base. Big conglomerates have come into to states, and this is very evident in Oregon, and started buying up a bunch of local newspapers and smashing them into very monopolistic conglomerates. This isn't old. You know, a lot of the newspapers that you may have grown up with, the Register Guard, Seattle has the Post Intelligence. Those were when two newspapers that served the same community merged. So that's why you have so many newspapers, that the Herald and News in Klamath Falls, that have these like smashed together names. But now we have companies coming in from out of state and buying wholesale these local publications, laying off a lot of the staff, selling off assets, and essentially keeping them on life support if they don't close entirely. We had Pamplin, the Eastern Oregon Media Group, and Gannett. And so what does this mean? Shrinking local media means fewer outlets, especially in rural areas. And these newspapers have been bought by out-of-state conglomerates. But this also means fewer reporters means there's more space and more need for local voices, and it's kind of up to us to fill the gaps that are left using these legacy platforms. So here, I will send this out to everybody who signed up for this training, but this is a worksheet that I put together. Well, I built off of something that one of Danielle's summer interns, Liz, put together. that has information about submitting letters to the editor for publication. This is not all the publications in Oregon, because the screenshot would have been weird and illegible, but it's many of them. And you can see here on one of the far columns, Carpenter Media Group, Carpenter Media Group, Carpenter Media Group, Carpenter Media Group, Carpenter Media Group. That is a company that came in. It bought the Pamplin papers, it bought the Eastern Oregon Media Group, and now kind of runs a lot of zombie papers. So when we talk about letters to the editor, we're generally talking about something short, 250 words or so. The document that I will send around has the specific guidelines and links to pages that explain more in detail the guidelines for each of these publications. And so they're generally shorter reactions from members of the community. You'll also hear a lot about op-eds and columns. Fewer and fewer of these publications are accepting guest opinions and columns. Sammy has one in the Bend Bulletin Monthly. Chandra Legui, who is in our Eugene office, has a column for the Eugene Weekly. But more and more, publications don't want to go through fact-checking guest viewpoints. So, for example, the Oregonian is only running probably 3 or 4 local viewpoints a week. So it's very difficult to get those op-eds placed. I've been trying for a long time. So we're focusing here on letters to the editor, which are much more accessible. So why would you write a letter to the editor? Well, this is a powerful public way to advocate for an environmental cause. You're putting your name out there, you're putting a cause out there, you're bringing attention to an issue and creating a paper trail of public concern so people can refer back to it, so you can refer back to it, so you can send things to elected officials and reach community members, decision makers. LTEs are one way to get the attention of the perhaps one journalist that may work at a publication, because you may say something interesting that they want to follow up on. They see that there is an interest in the community in a topic, and so they might cover that in the future. It's really, really, really important for holding elected officials publicly accountable. You are putting their name on something. You are identifying a problem or a solution, and then you are saying who can solve it, and you are putting a name to it. We'll come back to that. Sometimes there will be a story or an op-ed that will tell half the story. It will need some clarification or rebuttal, and there needs to be a different point of view published. And so an LTE offers the opportunity to do that. Things that don't get published are things that are too long or lack quality. All these papers have guidelines. If they have personal tax, if they lack context, there's some people who write kind of from their bubble of perspective. If you've ever stumbled into any niche communities online and thought, what are these people talking about? Then you understand what the lack of context can do. If it's not understandable to someone who has not been introduced to your issue, then it's probably not going to be published. And I would say at times a lack of some kind of expertise and authority can get things not published, but that is not as much an issue anymore. This one I just throw in here. This is Pick Your Battles. This is someone, I think this was High Country News. They wrote in this letter into High Country News about how in this illustration the Mountie was using the wrong kind of paddle for this kayak. I don't know if this was something nitpicky enough. It's an art. It's not supposed to be a realistic interpretation. Obviously, also, this vessel is much too small for this person. So one of the lessons is you don't write a letter to your editor about every little thing that you see that's gone wrong. So how do you write a letter to the editor? Well, you start with a hook. You want to tie your message to a recent article or event, something that's happened in the policy arena. It's great if you can talk about the importance of reporting that has happened. So if a publication, say you're writing something into the Oregonian saying, oh, that article that you published on 1% for Wildlife, and this is an example I'll use later, really emphasize the importance of this issue. The reporting was important, and you're essentially telling the paperback what you put out into the world in terms of your journalism was important. So telling that back to them helps you get published. Your hook can also have a personal connection to the story or issue. If you're writing in about roadless areas, talking about hiking in a roadless area, the environs of a roadless area, species that depend on the habitats in a roadless area, those things can create a really personal hook that brings the reader in right away. You want to be concise. Two great quotes on being concise. Brevity is the soul of wit. And I would have written a shorter letter, but I did not have the time. Try to be short, concise in your writing. There are word count guidelines. Shorter letters have a greater likelihood of being published. Newspaper editors, especially if they're still going to print, still think in column inches. So if they can get more good letters on a page rather than just 1 or 2 letters, because everybody went up to the, in some cases, 400-word word count, then they're not, they're less likely to publish your letter if you're going on longer. So try to keep things short, but have all the information you need in the letter. As I said before, you want to identify the problem or the solution and name who can fix it. One of the issues that I see with some people submitting letters to the editor, they'll say something like, Congress needs to fix this. Well, Congress is a huge body of 535 different people. They're not going to take personal responsibility for any of the issues that come up in any local papers or national papers. The way to get the attention of an elected official, whether that's someone in Congress, that's someone in the state legislature, whether that is a local board or commission, whether it's your mayor, city councilors, whatever, is to put their actual name in the letter. Now, it has to make sense when you do that. But one of the things that I did when I did communications for a congressional office is I would assemble a clips package. And a clips package is a package of all the media stuff that mentioned that particular elected official's name. So if you mention a name, if you try to get in their Google alerts, their web searches, that puts it in front of the elected's team and probably in front of the elected themselves. So make sure you name a specific person, whether that's Congresswoman Val Hoyle for not yet sponsoring the Roadless Area Conservation Act, whether that is the president of the Oregon State Senate, Rob Wagner, for not doing all he could to help push 1% for wildlife. Get the name in there. If you're submitting to a paper, make sure that you're thinking about geography. If you're sending something to the New York Times, they don't really care about, some of the inner workings of the Portland City Council. But the Oregonian does. So write with the outlet's audience in mind. Local names for local papers. And when you're writing to local publications, think about specific places and things that are connected to that specific location. So if I'm writing from Portland, I might write about Mount Hood. If I am writing from Eugene, I might be writing about the Willamette National Forest. If I'm writing from Bend, I might be writing about Three Sisters Wilderness and the Chutes or the Ochiko National Forest. So try to connect those specific places to kind of the service area and the audience area of your publication. Get a second pair of eyes on anything you write. You can see here, Rachel Ray finds inspiration in cooking her family and her dog. Probably could have used a proofread. This guy got a big old poster board and wrote, transfer federal land to Western states. So get a second pair of eyes on anything you write. You'll see an example I did not get a second pair of eyes on. We'll hope it looks good. And then let's say you get published, which is great. Congratulations. Now, because you named an elected official, get that letter to them, even if it will probably end up in their clips packet. You can send it through their online portal, or better yet, if it's a print, publication, cut it out and have it mailed to them so they can see, okay, people are paying attention and they got something printed. Share those published letters on social media and local advocacy groups. Share it with us. If you get something published, if it doesn't have a paywall and there's not a bunch of weird stuff around it, sometimes publications will just do like 8 letters in their online publications. But we will try to help boost your advocacy and keep writing to build yourself up as a credible voice. Other mistakes to avoid. We talked about naming institutions instead of individuals, writing too broadly or too long. Some of this is redundant. Some publications really don't like it if you send the same letter to a bunch of publications. Where we've talked about these conglomerates, you can actually send to, say, the Portland Tribune and have a decent chance of that letter actually showing up if someone visits like the Hillsborough or Beaverton paper, because of those conglomerates. They're kind of smashing those letters together. So you can actually, even though you're writing from a local perspective, get a much broader audience as a result of the terrible smashing together of these newspapers. Avoid acronyms, jargon, overly technical language, things that are not accessible to a reader that doesn't know what you're talking about. And remember that many of these publications are still print. Some of these publications are still print. So while you can embed a hyperlink, a link to a website in a written thing, remember that if it's printed, nobody can click on it. So don't rely on that exclusively for any kind of context or referring to anything. Make sure that in a plain text way, all the information you need is, if it has no links, it has no formatting. So no bolding, no italics, no bullets. It needs to be completely legible, just as plain text. And what are you going to write about? Well, we've talked about some of these things from my colleagues earlier. You can write about the Roadless Area Conservation Act. You can thank Oregon elected officials for supporting that. You can write about Valhoyle or Bentz and their need to support that. And you can write about 1% for Wildlife. We might want to target those publications or those letters for more like November or December, but we might want to get a few of them in now. So let's do an example based on 1% for Wildlife. And this is the example that I did not get anybody else's eyes on before I put it together. But I'll break down the elements of this letter to the editor. And even though it looks like there's a lot here, when it comes to word count, we're under 200 words here. So you see here in this first section, we talk about the Oregonian Oregon Live recently reported on ODFW's list of 300 species of greatest conservation concern. Here we have a link. Oh, it deleted my link. The first sentence here was actually supposed to be Oregon's wildlife are in trouble. That would have been the hook. So I will fix that slide for the next time I do this presentation. That would have been the hook. And then I'm linking to recent coverage. In reality, Oregonian and Oregon/Oregon Live picked up a different publications story on the ODFW list, but this is an example. It doesn't have to be completely reality-based. In the second section, we talk about specific species that this impacts. Coho salmon, gray whales, tufted puffins. And without these action, these species may become extinct. Here we have specific species that people can see in their mind's eye, and they're drawn to a connection there. I like gray whales. I don't want them to go extinct. There was recently some coverage about tufted puffins and their declining population. Don't want to see them go extinct. So we have some specifics and the consequence, and they're very evocative. Next, we talk about the solution. We have 1% for wildlife, and we explain what it is. We don't just reference it. Not enough people know what it is to just say 1% for wildlife. We explain that it's raising the statewide lodging tax, and how that can generate money to help recover species and their habitats. This explanation may be redundant with the story that you reference that's fine. Remember, all of the information needs to be in the letter that you're writing, so people don't have to go and do other homework. Here, I have also rebutted an opposing argument. So people will say, oh, lodging tax is already too high. We can say, even with this increase, Oregon will still have one of the lowest lodging taxes in the country. And the reason we are looking at the lodging tax for this is because it helps fund the protections of the very landscapes that the wildlife wildlife that people come here to experience. Then we go on to the last part. Last two sections, name who can fix the issue. The Oregon legislature, and specifically President Rob Wagner, can really help push this through. And a call to action, everybody should get behind this. The legislature should pass it. Again, this is under 200 words, even though it's missing the hook that I had at the beginning. But you can see here, there's a lot of information that you can convey in under 200 words. And now we'll go ahead and actually we'll jump to, well, team, do we want to do, what's next or Q&A? This will be Q&A for, this is if you want to send any of your letters for me to look at. There's my information.
There's not any questions in the chat right now, so why don't we give folks just a couple minutes to drop them in there, and while we do that, we could go over what's next. Does that sound good?
Great.
Cool. Okay, so everyone, run, don't walk to the Q&A box and feel free to drop any questions that came to you. And we'll stay on for a couple minutes so we can get those answered for you. And then if any other questions come up, maybe after this event, you can feel free to email any of us. Our email addresses are just our first initial, last initial at oregonwild.org, so you can get in touch with us that way. But first, let's chat a little bit about things that you can do next. Obviously, you're all here because you want to take action and you want to know how you can plug into this movement. So we have a couple of ways here to do that. Joining our email list, good news, if you're here, you're already on our email list, most likely. But if you found us through Instagram, just make sure you're staying on our email list and you're getting those. Because not only will we share our updated events list, but you'll also be some of the first to know when we have new calls to action, like any petitions that need to be signed, if we need phone calls or letters sent to representatives, or if there's an open public comment period with a deadline that we need you to weigh in, and so much more. So that's going to be the main way that we communicate those action items with you all. Or if you're active on social media, Phoenix mentioned the Wild Ones group chat that we have going on Instagram. So it's super easy to join. We're also going to be sharing all of this information there, but it's also an opportunity to hear more from the organizers so that you can stay up to date with some of the finer details about what's going on. So to join, all you need to do is visit our Instagram page, which is at Oregon Wilds with no space. And then you click the Wild Ones chat bubble that's in our bio. So super simple to do that. And then we have a number of upcoming events in the works right now. So our plan for this program is to have monthly in-person events through at least the end of the year and beyond. We're also working on adding a couple of more virtual events too. So we have staff, like I mentioned earlier, in Portland, Bend, Salem, Eugene, and we're hoping to bring more of these in person right to you. So on October 15th, Phoenix is hosting a workshop in Salem on how to use content creation for conservation. Then in November, we are hosting a workshop on self-care for activists so that you can learn some effective ways to sustain yourself so that you can continue to sustain the movement. In December, we're planning a series of holiday action parties, so stay tuned for that. There will probably be Christmas cookies involved and some card making for our legislators, so that should be super fun. And then in January, we're going to gather again for a lobbying 101 training in preparation for the lobby day that Danielle had mentioned earlier, and I hope you join both of those. So we'll share dates, locations, and RSVP information through our email mailing list and in the Wild Ones group chat as soon as that is available. But you're also welcome to suggest new trainings to us. We want to hear from you and what you're interested in. Phoenix mentioned earlier that it takes a whole lot of us with a whole lot of different talents to bring to the table. And so we want to hear what you want to work on. If there's something that you've been interested in trying and maybe just don't really know how to pull it off, let us know and maybe we can put together a training for that too and bring that to you. And there's also ways that you can take action now. So definitely get to work on those letters to the editor. We're happy to take a look at them if you want a second set of eyes on them too. So feel free to send them our way. And if you get one submitted and published, definitely let us know so that we can help boost it across platforms and give it as much mileage as possible. And then we also mentioned some of the petitions that we have right now. So the 1% for Wildlife and the Roadless Area Conservation Act are two active campaigns we have going right now. So in the coming days, you'll all receive a follow-up email with a recording from this event, as well as the links to the petitions that you can sign right now. So there's a way for you to take action, and you'll have all of these resources at your fingertips for when you write your first letter to the editor. And with that, I see